Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello and welcome to the Extreme Sports Performance Podcast. My name is Ryan Blake. I'm the founder and director of Extreme Sports Performance. In this episode we're talking to Tom Scales. Tom is a senior technician and running department manager at ProFeet Sports Lab. We ask him the questions we ask all our guests: who he is, what he does, where has he come from and what has he done along the way, what are the key moments from his career so far, what are his top areas of interest, what are the most valuable things he's learned, who are his top influencers, what are his top resources for information, what are his top sports performance exercises and or drills, what are his top pieces of advice in life, exercise and or sport, and where can people find him. As normal, we freestyle a lot in between questions and around the topic that we're discussing. Really enjoyed recording this episode with Tom. Hope you enjoy listening to it. Here we go. Hi Tom, welcome to the Extreme Sports Performance Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Hi, no, lovely. Thanks for having me on.
Would you mind just giving everyone an overview to start with of who you are and what you do?
Right, so my name is Tom Scales. I work at ProFeet Sports Lab in Fulham. I've now been there since 2018. I started off as one of the senior technicians. I'm now the manager of our run department. And what we do is we try to bring biomechanics to the masses. So we have two sides of the store. We've got our ski boot lab, but where I come into more is going to be the running department itself. So we do running assessment, gait analysis, but our main focus is creating custom-made insoles and orthotics for everyday athletes up to Olympic level athletes as well.
Fantastic. I'll come on to more of the specifics later on about the ins and outs of, day-to-day systems and processes. Could you just tell us your story up until now? So where have you come from? What have you done along the way, and what kind of got you into this?
Yeah. So originally, running was not really my main sport. I kind of grew up in a very sporty family, and actually cricket was what my brother and dad had been doing for years and years. So I kind of grew up playing a bit of football, a bit of cricket. But when I was around sort of the beginning of high school age, I discovered rowing. And then I basically spent the next 10, 15 years training myself through. It became part of the England Talent Pathway. I started getting medals from British championships and starting to try to enter into sort of Team GB. Didn't go that successfully, but when I got to university, I then joined basically Europe's most successful rowing team. And that's where I kind of really fell in love with the movement side and basically the elite side of performance. There was kind of a few avenues I wanted to go to, but actually I managed to, royally injure my back quite badly in my first year. And after that, I decided, rather than looking at myself and moving to the next level, how can I prevent other people from making the same mistakes that I did? So at university, I was studying sports science already, so I kind of edged everything that I was doing towards biomechanics, performance, and how to prevent injury. I think somebody who's been mentioned on the podcast before, but he's sort of one of the leading rowing biomechanists, I think, pretty much in the world. We actually had him create a custom-made rowing machine with force plates, wires, gyros, basically all the information kind of little science nerds like me would absolutely love. Did that, but actually then moved towards the running side myself. So I moved to London to try and follow that dream, basically. Joined ProFeet, and it's all been up from there.
Fantastic. And what would you say your key moments have been so far since your time at ProFeet? Things that have really stood out to you, things you've really enjoyed, things that really kind of above and beyond of any other moments really in that timeline?
Well, for us, it works slightly differently because what I would do for, let's say, an Olympic athlete or to somebody who's just unable to walk in comfort, the outcomes tend to be pretty similar. So what I do doesn't change, but I can kind of judge my success and the moments I always look back on is on how that we've helped other people. Actually, this year, probably 2 cases jump out more than anything else. First one would be I had one of my athletes get the first Olympic medal that they've had, and obviously one of any of the athletes I've worked with have got. So Emily Campbell got silver in the weightlifting, which again, we do a very small part, we help out. But obviously, if we can start to prevent the injuries, help their training, get them to that podium itself, that's kind of how I can judge how well that I'm doing. Again, we've also had another athlete, one of our ambassadors, go to Marathon des Sarthe, which is basically where a bunch of people run across the desert for 6 days.
Yeah.
And yeah, he managed to get 6th in his category, top 10 finish. So see, if we can help people get to these positions, that's kind of how I judge how well and the successful points in my career so far. Actually, sometimes the more rewarding ones are people who've just been in pain for 5-10 years. They've always been plagued by issues and injuries. And if you can see somebody and by the time they come in, maybe in 6 months' time, they're like, well, my knee hasn't hurt at all for 6 months. Everything's worked. I've run my first 5K without pain. And those little things for those tend to be, I find, slightly even more rewarding than see the massive elite level performances themselves.
Could you just give us a bit more information then for someone who will start with running, someone who comes to see you, who's a runner? You know, how would you start to help them? What methods or what tick boxes do you have to go through, check boxes do you have to go through in order to allow them to leave there in a better place than when they came in?
Absolutely. So the way we like to look at it, it's almost like a puzzle. We're taking bits of information from different areas. So actually the first thing we do is just have a chat, basically, find out what the issue is, what they're looking to do, what they're looking to achieve. What we then basically start on is actually just having a hands-on assessment. We start sort of starting on that foot level, seeing what the functionality like, seeing where the weaknesses are positioned, see where we need to start to, especially what we do a lot of, I should say. We work more with footwear and insoles and things like this. We'll then do a full gait analysis. So we, taking our background, so we're all kind of sports scientists, biomechanists ourselves, go into a little bit more detail than kind of your traditional, maybe going into a sports shop would be in that way. From that, we'll basically do a full body. We can start to break down where inconsistencies are lying, how these, let's say if you're very stiff into the ankle, how this is then impacting the performance itself. We can then basically take pressure scans, so basically see how pressure is being distributed, force issues might be coming through, center of mass problems. From that, we can then create custom-built running shoes, custom-built insoles to help these individuals. So almost taking these bits of information, whether it's pronation, I'm sure we'll start talking about injuries and issues in the future down here. But yeah, if we can start to see a very classic one that runners talk about is pronation and neutral, it's where shoes come into kind of those two kind of overarching categories, if you will. And we can start to control these movements into the ankle. We can then start to basically see how they're affecting movements up the chain. Because it actually sounds weird, but often we start to see things like hip issues, back issues, shoulder issues, all can actually come down to just an issue with the big toe. And it's finding and knowing how these links work together and how basically we can find what might be going wrong and then how we can eliminate that in sort of going forwards.
How would a different type of client, so a client coming to you to try and get a solution for their ski boots, how would that differ, if at all, to someone coming in to try and get a solution for their running?
So for the ski side, it's a lot more to do with the comfort. See, I'm sure lots of people here will ski as well. And I'm sure lots of people have had rental boots that are absolutely horrible. And after an hour, your feet are in agony and you're just taking them off.
Yeah.
For that side, again, it's looking at that comfort. So it's less necessarily with the performance base. For most people, it's kind of more of the holiday rather than racing side. And that is a lot more to do with the shapes and the shells. So we have a team of, again, people have done it for years, masters in biomechanics to try and help alleviate issues. But actually a lot of that will be in the workshop itself. So stretching, grinding, creating issues or new things, pads to basically get a big plastic shell to be as comfortable as possible.
Yeah.
Whereas actually on the run side, we'll be looking more at the dynamic motion. So yes, when you put a shoe on, obviously you don't want to be putting yourself, if you've got a very wide foot, into something super narrow. But actually it then comes down a lot more to the materials that are used into the shoes. How, let's say, the heel counter, so the bit that kind of locks into the back, the different densities of EVAs or foams that they're using, start to then influence up that chain, so the ankles, the knees. It's a lot more movement based, whereas actually if you're looking at ski boots, it's a lot more shape and fitting based.
Sure. Okay. No, that makes complete sense. And I'm more of a snowboarder than a skier, but I have worn ski boots in the past, and they are not very comfortable. So I think that is definitely something people will be a big fan of if they have to spend a long time in them. So with regards to the type of clients you have come in to see you, who would you say your typical client is, or what client comes in the most with the most common problem that they need to solve? That what kind of level, what kind of sport?
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
So I would say 70% of the people we see are runners. Some are just day-to-day walkers, hikers who, again, want to be more comfortable. They just want to improve small things. But I would say the majority of people are aiming towards that kind of 5-10K area, maybe pushing to a half marathon once a year, or people coming up into the training cycles for things like the London Marathon. And it's, let's say, their first or second one. They've had a horrible time the last one. So they basically want to be kitted out and try and take the feet out of the equation, basically.
Sure.
That's one thing. It's always going to be the horrible winter training cycle.
Yeah.
But again, you're putting in hours and hours a week. You're spending time on the feet. The last thing you want to start to pick up is injuries that take you out for 2-3 weeks. So if we can start to, again, eliminate these potential risks, that's where we come in. But actually, I'd say of those 70% who are runners, most of them come in with some form of injury, something that they're looking to alleviate, something they're trying to help. And often it is the combination of strength conditioning, seeing physios, rehab side of it. But actually, if every time you go running and you're wearing a 5-year-old pair of Nikes that you've pulled out of the cupboard, every time you do go out for that run, you're kind of setting yourself back 3 steps. So all that training you're doing becomes almost pointless, basically.
Sure. So that alludes really nicely to the next thing I was going to ask you. So if people didn't come and see you and they just carried on running in their old shoes, what are the risks involved there? So that's the first question. And the second question is, what are the most common injuries that you've seen in that instance?
So running shoes traditionally last around 400 or 500 miles. A shoe will peak at about 50 miles. So again, same with hiking boots, running shoes. The last thing you want to do is your race day and something you've never really double checked. So once you start to get beyond that just middle ground, you've run in the shoe for 3-4 months. Let's say you've done that marathon training, you've got to 400-500 miles. That white foam that you see in the sole of the shoe, this EVA, it starts to deteriorate. And the purpose of that is basically to shock absorb you when you're landing and then retain the energy, kind of like a big spring, like a big trampoline, and drive you forwards. As that shoe gets older, its ability to do that starts to diminish pretty rapidly. So when you are getting to those high miles, you're spending 20 miles running out, ideally you want that shoe to be making your life as easy as possible. Whereas actually the older they get, the worse they become from just a usage perspective. That shock absorbency means your ankles and knees, the stresses that go into them are significantly higher. But also, let's say you need that support. Your foot starts to roll in, the knees aren't sitting quite straight. That support system that the shoes would have come with originally, again, won't be doing that job for you. What that tends to lead to, the most common injuries, probably looking around the ankles and knees. So generic knee pain, and it's traditionally called runner's knee, which is probably the least helpful diagnosis that somebody can give them. If you go to a doctor and you tell them you're a runner and your knee hurts and they tell you you've got runner's knee, it's very useful for them to have some. They'll tell you to do a bit of ibuprofen. But that's actually where we come in. We can start to see, let's say your knee is hurting, so either side, the inside or outside, maybe top or bottom. We can then start to link that to the movements. We can link that to muscular weaknesses. We can link that to pressure imbalances or speeds of movement. Once we start to know, let's say, that knee pain is coming from, we might work out, actually, it's because the hamstrings compared to the quadriceps, there's a big imbalance through here. So when you're landing, that kind of shock absorbing phase, actually, you're kind of collapsing through. You're not able to attenuate that force of landing. Because when you run, it's kind of up to 4 or 5 times your body weight coming into the ground each step. If you're not strong enough to hold that once your body fatigues, again, bending that knee suddenly becomes a little bit more tiresome. It might be the opposite. We might start to see actually that foot lands and kind of pronates, so kind of collapses inwards. As a consequence, your ankle starts to move, the knees collapsing in as well. And actually what we'll be looking to do is, again, supportive shoes, looking at designing a custom product that will actually help hold that ankle. So as it kind of passes itself up to the knee, we can almost keep everything, that hip, that knee, the ankle, into that straight aligned position. But actually, it's always a little bit varied, because the example I like to always use, I know it's going back to the elite, we'll think of Mo Farah and Usain Bolt. Obviously, both incredible runners, but completely different ends of the spectrum. They run completely differently. So if we try to get one of them to run like the other, it's never going to work. They're never going to be at their best. So it's actually trying to see how, not necessarily we can get every single individual looking like they can do a marathon like Mo Farah can, but it's how to get where they are now to where they need to be to try and prevent these injuries.
Sure.
But every person is different. I'd say, knees, the classic, and probably one that's less of an injury, if you will, but plantar fasciitis. It's what we see probably more commonly than some of the others as well. And people spend all day, every day walking around in, let's call them your smart leather Oxfords or a pair of canvas shoes with no sole to them, no supports. And actually that arch of the foot, basically where the plantar fascia sits, can start to get a little more inflamed, a little bit more stressed. That's actually where a lot of the issues can come from. It just happens to be that when we start running, you said a lot more force comes down into that foot itself. The arch works kind of like a big suspension bridge, like a spring. It extends, it lands, and kind of elongates. So that stretch shortening cycle starts then to cause the problems. But actually, it doesn't necessarily spawn from the running. It can just spawn from wearing inappropriate footwear for 10, 12 hours of the day and then expecting your feet to still work as they should do.
Mm-hmm. Sure. What would you say when the timeline is from when someone comes in and they're kitted out with a new pair of insoles and or a new pair of shoes? How long do you feel, in your experience, it takes for them to feel the benefits of that?
That unfortunately comes along the line of how long is a piece of string.
Sure.
Sometimes it's very quick. But with any, just say you come in, you've never had an insole. It's like putting a new pair of walking boots on. You still need to kind of break it in. And it's giving people contact and proprioception they've never really had before. So actually, that first week is always going to feel a bit odd. You may start to notice a few little kind of niggles and twigs because we've changed your alignment. We've started to put you into a position your body is not used to having. We'll then start to get people to kind of gradually break back into it. So a few days of walking on the insoles or shoes start to then bring the running back in. So quite literally walking before you can run. Mm-hmm. Often, I would love to say anywhere between probably 2 to 6 weeks is where we'd ideally be aiming. Again, a horrible injury to the knee. It's been happening for years and there's a lot more structural damage and things going on, or let's say a torn Achilles. We know it's not going to be an overnight fix. It's never a magic pill. What it will be, though, is looking at taking that out of the equation. So if you are, let's just take an Achilles issue at the moment. If you're going running in a pair of shoes and every time you go for the run, it kind of starts to flare up and hurts, and then you rest it for a couple of days and you think, right, let's go for the next run. And it's just this never-ending cycle. It's still going to take that bit of strength conditioning. It's still going to take that stretching the calf, relaxing out what's happening down there. But actually, rather than every time you're going for the run, it flaring up, we can start to reduce that and bring it down from, let's say, a 10 to a 5. As that strength conditioning, it allows it to work more effectively. So as with any interaction of stretching, strengthening, it takes at least weeks to start to kick in. But sometimes it's not, yes, what we aim for, but it's never the case. Sometimes people put the things on and actually they're like, oh, I can't feel my hip pain anymore. Yeah. And sometimes it is as magic and good as that, but it's it's rare that happens. It normally takes a little bit of time for things to settle in and break in. But yeah, normally 2 to 6 weeks is where I aim for.
Sure thing. I mean, I suppose it's almost like any kind of approach to training, isn't it? Like there's a fine balance between volume and intensity, and everyone's going to respond different to that depending on their kind of unique individual makeup. And I suppose this is no different.
Well,
yeah, brilliant.
No, you tell an athlete to rest, they're never going to do it, even though they probably should.
Yeah. Fantastic. No, that's great, Tom. Thanks very much for clearing that up. That's really interesting. So do you have any other areas of interests, related to what you do that you felt you've kind of stumbled across or feel like interact well with your data, the things you find you do day to day with biomechanics?
So the two kind of areas actually I do often work with as well. So I'm was a personal trainer, still am, but don't do it as much these days. So looking at that strength and conditioning, starting to see how, yes, we can start to look at products, but actually looking at, right, you've got ankle pain, but actually there's a lot of issues coming up with the hips. We need to strengthen the glutes. We need to work on the eccentric movements.
Yeah.
So I do spend a lot more time also looking at how we can start to improve, not just injuries, but general performance that way. The other bit that kind of crept up on me, which I wasn't expecting to be when I started here all those years ago, just become a massive shoe nerd as well. I never really had any knowledge or understanding of what the difference between one shoe would be to the other. Yes, we kind of understood it, but actually now
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
every time new products come out, I spend the next 2 days Googling, finding stuff. For us, luckily, we work with a lot of the brands. So we have their reps come in, they'll bring their kind of new models for the following seasons in, and we get to put them through our paces and start to play around and see how just increasing or decreasing the weight by 5%, but increasing responsiveness of a shoe, how that starts to then impact, well, firstly, how comfortable a shoe is, but actually how that performance can start to interact back into the general population as well. When the classic thing everyone loves at the moment, but the plated shoes, things like the Breaking 2 project, Kipchoge getting his sub 2 hour marathon, all of these new kind of prototype, just how much science can we throw into a shoe to get it to be as effective, as efficient as humanly possible. For again, anyone who has that interest in sports science and bettering performance, it's kind of the forefront of where it needs to be in running at the moment.
I know we might have already touched upon this, but say you've got this brand new shoe that's all singing, all dancing, just come out, and it's meant to do all these things, and someone thinks, oh, well, yeah, that's going to solve all my problems. What's the difference between them getting that shoe, then getting a fairly standard shoe, but with a really individualized insole? How are they different, and how's one going to help the other?
Realistically, getting that, we'll call them kind of your everyday shoes. So brands have, we'll call them 3 tiers: an entry level, where they're kind of your 60, 70 pound price points, and they're for people who need something but aren't necessarily running too much. Most brands then have the majority of their range sitting at kind of that 120, 130, and that's where we would tend to spend a lot more time. The shoes interact with the body better. That's where we'd start to introduce the insoles into. That's definitely going to be where actually the benefits come from more, because every brand, every new shoe is going to be the best thing since sliced bread. Every brand is telling you that. It doesn't quite add up in that way. But it's the thing, having all bells and whistles doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Just because the shoe might be 250 pounds doesn't mean actually it's that brilliant for you. It might conveniently be the perfect shoe for you. But yeah, the best shoe for me might be completely different to what it is for you, and vice versa. And equally, it's the one we tend to see more is when we look at those all bells and whistles, the carbon plated shoes, people tend to put them on expecting, okay, they worked for Mo Farah, they worked for these people, they probably will work for me. And they'll go out doing kind of a 40-minute park run and turn out with massive injuries after. And it's actually understanding that, yes, all these shoes have these bells and whistles, but let's, again, take those Alpha Fly or Vaporfly. They're designed for people for a 2-hour marathon, designed for very strong individuals who are able to basically control these movements. Whereas, I mean, I've tried them. I cannot run in them, unfortunately. My hamstrings and glutes just start screaming at me after about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Again, it's that speed of movement. They're almost firing you off the ground. For me, I know I just don't have the combination since the back injury to basically hold my body into the positions they need to be. And for me, I might get a PB if I tried to race in them, but I'd also then probably take the next 3 weeks off with horrible hamstring pulls and injuries through here. And it's finding that balance. And yes, you can do it, but actually, do you really need to do that for your training? Are you going to spend maybe an hour on a course doing a 10K or a half marathon, maybe slightly longer? But actually, you're then going to spend 50K, 60K each week to get there. And that's where you need that kind of shoe, which mechanically is going to keep you as injury-free as possible. Mm-hmm. So it sometimes is that slight weighing up of, yes, I do all my training in what I know I should be in, but then I might race in something and it might give me that extra 30 seconds and I can sacrifice a little bit of a week or so off after with a few niggles here and there.
Sure thing. Okay. So I mean, it's ultimately about reverse engineering, I suppose, the outcome you want and working back from there. Rather than to find shortcuts. Yeah.
I wish there were shortcuts. It's
everyone that's
my life a lot easier.
Everyone tries to look for them, which, it's human nature, I suppose. I get why. We're all busy. We'll have limited time these days, and we want quicker results. But sometimes that can make the destination of where you're trying to get to a lot further away when things like injuries keep happen, and then add twice the duration to what it should have been in the first place. Brilliant. Okay, well, that's really great. So what would you say in your time at Profi, the most valuable things you've learned are from when you first started to now? But if you can maybe, I don't know, pick a couple of things, 2 or 3 things that you really are obvious to you now that weren't at the start.
It sounds really cliche, but the more you learn, the more you see, the more you realize you don't actually know. So there's so much more out there to learn. Mm-hmm. Again, you start to scrape the surface of anything, people doing degrees, getting into jobs. You start in that first year being like, you know what, I'm pretty good at this. I know what I'm doing. And then actually you suddenly realize it's like the iceberg. You've only really just started to understand what's going on. And once you start to realize that, you can spend every day taking each new person who's coming in, actually learning from them almost, starting to see how they're moving, how their issues are related to those movements. And then you can use that for the next person who comes in, rather than just trying to almost have a tick box of things that, okay, this person's, the ankle's doing this, I need to do that. It's trying to almost learn, and each time you do it, grab from different areas of your knowledge base that you worked on. And that probably was the one thing that I only really started to notice when I started to see the more complex cases coming in, and it turned out to be not quite as simple in some of these times, and you're almost spending an hour in the workshop designing, creating these insoles, whereas sometimes if it's just a little bit easier, you might be taking 20 minutes. And so, but also just learning from other people, having people we work with come in and help and chat to us. So we have a sort of biomechanist consultant who's, again, been working with us for about 10 years now. He's worked at Olympics, sort of up to the top level and down, and just looking at the same bits of information, all these little elements that he starts to notice that once you see, you're like, oh, obviously that makes sense. But until somebody's kind of started to put these links together, it's things that you never would quite start to see. So I think it's just, utilizing every single bit of opportunity you have to try and improve. Sure. And having these people come in, working with partners like yourself, working with people like chiropractors, osteopaths who have completely different knowledge bases, all of that can start to help with this as well.
Sure thing. It's all about perspective, isn't it, really? I think I'm personally, completely agree with you. The longer you are involved in something, the more you realise that you don't know. And if you can look at things from a different angle, a different viewpoint, or have someone else's opinion in the equation, it does make you think for longer before you you provide an answer.
Always trust people with a better knowledge base than you.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. Surround yourself by people cleverer than you,
Exactly.
which always helps. This alludes really nicely into the next thing I was going to ask you, and that is, have you had or do you have any influences or any kind of recommended resources for information related to what we're discussing?
Yes, there's always sort of peer-reviewed journals, but they tend to look at kind of larger populations and they never tend to go into specifics. So for us, actually, every week we kind of set out time to have training. So the best resources that we kind of use are other people in the industry. So I think just a couple of weeks ago, we had a guy called Andy Broziak, who's one of our ambassadors. He works at Precision Hydration, come in and start to talk to us about how what he does can influence our athletes as well. And it's starting to actually use these people. And I'm not going to lie, my knowledge of sort of nutrition, hydration, it's all down to a personal level of I've gone for runs, I've done ultra marathons, I've done long sessions, and I worked out what kind of works for me. But actually realizing when a customer or a client asks me about this, me not really having a scientific background in it, my answers tend to be a little bit vague, a little bit kind of, I will pass you on to somebody else. But actually being able to answer and understand this tends to help a little bit more. And again, other people, I'd say, are probably my biggest resource for information. Influencers, probably less so in the area itself, but probably people from my past that have pushed me to get into this side of things.
Okay.
So in terms of rowing, we'll go back a few years now, back when I was training. Again, we'd have people come in, we'd have sort of in the England talent pathway, these coaches who didn't look at it so much from okay, we're just going to go do some weights. There was a lot of the sports science and actually working out how we could find these marginal gains and starting to improve small areas, which obviously now into what I'm doing from a day to day. If we can start to improve somebody 5-10%, that's a 5-10% we wouldn't have otherwise. And also, yeah, just going back into university days of doing my dissertation, doing projects, having mentors and sort of people pushing you into almost reading the extra journal, understanding this a little bit more. Each of these little areas just start to kind of...
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Although you don't really appreciate it in the time, almost the way that you think, that kind of analytical side, having worked with, I think, Charlie Simpson and Val for my dissertation, having to almost go into the detail that we did, it now makes doing this on a day-to-day so much easier, because for that, I had to go through all the athletes and then write 10,000, 15,000 words on it. For this, I can kind of go in and actually, as long as I can understand it, I get to almost narrow that down into that hour, 2-hour appointment, rather than having to spend a week and a half trying to explain people's movements to them. It's finding how you can make people understand what's happening in a very, almost in layman's terms, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
Throw a lot of big words at people and none of them will make any sense. But actually the founder of Profi, who unfortunately is no longer with us, used to say that if you can't put what's happening into hand motions and whistles, it's probably a little bit too complicated. So if you can try and make sure that what you know can relate to that, people can start to understand the science a lot easier.
Yeah, sure. No, I completely agree. And I'm a big fan of the quote that a true expert often explains things as simply as possible in whatever context. So yeah, I'm definitely on board with that viewpoint there. On to the next section, which is like the meat and potato section that often skip to because they want instant actionable kind of advice they can apply to their own training, their own performance. So could you give us some suggestions or some examples of some sports performance exercises or drills that people could use? Let's say runners, maybe an amateur runner or an intermediate runner and an advanced runner that you've maybe used yourself or you've seen or recommended people use that's had good results that could either help reduce injuries and or improve their performance?
We'll take one that we'll actually take it into three areas, as you said. First one that kind of covers both from somebody who's never really run before up to that top level. Even if you are spending 25 minutes running on the feet, you're still putting your foot through a lot of stress. So just actually relieving that little bit of pressure, rolling that foot out. So people may have seen kind of these spiky trigger point release balls and things like that. Actually just spending 10 minutes in an evening, it's honest, we're all going to sit in front of the sofa, cook some rice, spend 10 minutes doing nothing. Having like a tennis ball, these trigger point balls, just rolling out the arch, starting to get these little intrinsic foot muscles to work slightly more effectively, relaxing out. Doesn't matter if you are an Olympic athlete, it doesn't matter if you've never run before, you're still putting that foot through an equivalent amount of stress at either end. So that's something that can be used for everyone. And I'm kind of coming into it, I have very high arches myself, so my feet are always pretty sore at the end of the day. So just sitting down in an evening, relaxing things out, just helps no end. But probably the three main areas of exercises that any runner could do. The first one tends to sit into mobility. Just look into the hips. And actually it's something that we've seen significantly more of over the last 18 months. And it tends to be things like the hip flexors. At the moment, people who are working from home tend to wake up, sit behind a desk, then go sit on the sofa and go back to bed. There's no real movement that goes on. Yeah, you might go out for a run, but the rest of the 20 hours or so, everything's a little bit more sedate. Whereas when people work in and out of offices, you're getting up, walking to the station, standing on the tube, walking to get dinner, coffees, it's a lot more movement. So actually getting those sort of hip flexors stretched out tends to be one of the most common things we can do. So that's just stretching, so down on one knee, sort of stretching the arm above on the same leg, just starting to move that whole anterior chain out together. Because when you're running, you're kind of having this extension and flexion, and having that tension that sits from the front part, so kind of in front of your hip. As you try and swing that leg out behind you, it's like a big elastic band. Once you've got to that point of stretch, there's nowhere ready for it to go. So we have to then kind of swing, try and rotate the hips, and again, we start to lose and put more stress into the backs and other areas. The second one is probably just straight up strengthening itself. And it's where we would probably be looking at more kind of eccentric movements. So 3 seconds up, 3 seconds down, all on single leg as well. So if you take a squat, people cheat basically. The stronger leg does most of the work. You kind of have to, you can hide some poor technique. As soon as you go onto a single leg exercise, which effectively what running is, you're only ever going to have one foot on the ground at either time. That leg is the one that's doing all of that support work, that driving. So actually spending time working on single leg. So step up, single leg squats, Bulgarian split squats, lunges, all of this, but focusing on a 3 seconds up or 3 seconds back down movement, all looking at that control. So not allowing the hips to start to sway around, the knees to do their own thing. It's almost take a step up or a squat, keeping that ankle, that knee, that hip into that aligned position, holding that core strong, not allowing things to start to kind of shift with the hips.
Yeah, sure.
The third, and probably one that most runners will neglect a little bit, it's actually just simple plyometric work. Getting that little bit more explosive power, that little bit more kind of snappiness into the stride. So again, focusing, probably we'll take those hip flexors again. It's a classic one that gets neglected with runners as well. Things like box jumps, things like single leg bounds. So just standing on one leg and seeing how far you can physically jump forwards just gets the body used to kind of like a long jumper, getting that momentum to lift you as high and as fast as possible each step.
Yeah.
And again, you'll see kind of your Mo Farahs of the world looking like gazelles kind of running effortlessly. And the rest of us, it's a little more kind of plodding, a little bit more sedate. If we can get ourselves just to be that little more explosive, little bits of skipping exercises as well, getting those ankles just to fire that little bit of movement as you're coming off the ground, all just starts to come through and leads into the running itself.
Sure thing.
That's probably the three areas, mobility, bit of strengthening, and then a little bit of a spring as well.
In summary, then, if you're increasing range of motion around joints, you are making muscles in the leg more robust because they're stronger. And then the plyometrics are going to, increase your reactivity, your rate of force development off the floor, which is ultimately going to make your cadence, your stride more effective, more efficient. You're not going to leak as much energy. And you, as you said, you'll have more spring on the floor. So that makes lots of sense and fairly simple. suggestions, but those simple suggestions are often the most valuable, the most useful ones for people who've never done it before.
We forget to do as well, more than anything else.
Yeah.
People go out for a run, they'll do their 10K,
Yeah.
but they won't really warm down properly. They won't warm up. They won't take that kind of strengthening side of, your cardiovascular might be there, but actually your legs are the bit that are failing at 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Your lungs and things are feeling fine, but your legs are in agony, and it's trying to get the two to just start to balance up to each other.
In terms of strength and conditioning or S&C, we often find with runners that we work with that they are a small S and a big C, because they just do lots of conditioning and not very much strength work. So it's just trying to make those as balanced as possible, really. So just to kind of wrap things up then, Tom, what would you say your top pieces of advice are for people listening to this? So they could be people who are just getting into running, people who are weekend warriors, or people who run to a semi-professional, professional level. What advice would you give them that you could easy, quick takeaways that, in your experience, have been really helpful?
The easiest thing is to get a gait analysis. Even if it's not us, go to somewhere who will be able to talk you through things, rather than just picking up a shoe from the shelf. Finding something that is actually going to work for you. It's going to make your life easier, improve your performance. Again, you're going to be spending the money on any shoe. You might as well get one that you know is going to be doing the best things for you. Again, if you've got injuries, try to ascertain where it's coming from. Yes, see physios, but actually, again, utilize people in the business who can start to almost eliminate these potential risks for you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the main things are probably, as things start to go wrong, don't run through them. Make sure things are then set up properly. Take certain elements out of the equation. Again, take the feet out if there's issues through here. If there's injuries cropping up, work out why that's happening and take that out of the equation as well. It's the thing that people tend to neglect. They'll run through issues expecting them to go away and only make things worse. So basically listen to your body and then hopefully try and prevent any risk of injury if possible, if you can.
Brilliant. Bruno, that's great advice. Thanks very much. And if people were, listening to this, then they think, actually, I quite like to come and see Tom. I quite like to come to ProFeet to get this done. What's the best way they could get in touch with you and the best way they can do that?
So we are based in Fulham. You can find us at profeet.co.uk. We have Instagram you can contact us on, which is ProFeet Custom. Give us a ring. I would love to tell you I know our number off the top of my head, but I cannot quite remember it.
Okay, I'll put it in the show notes. So people...
below. But yeah, we do different levels of appointments. So even if it is people coming in just needing a new shoe, we do sort of half an hour appointments like that. I also run appointments, which we kind of call our 3D Pro, and it basically goes into every bit of details. It's 2.5 hours. It's almost a little bit of a lecture. We can look at joint loading. We can look at differences between the left and right. So the angles for each stage of the running to 0.1 of a degree. We can pretty much go into any nerdy detail that any runner will need. So we kind of work from that base level all the way up to, again, those Olympic athletes who just want to find the extra 5-10 seconds off their races. So yeah, we can look at it from both ends of this perspective.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And as I mentioned before, I'll put all that information into the show notes. So for everyone listening, you can just click below and access that directly. But Tom, I'd just like to thank you so much for your time today and coming on the show.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to episode 36. We hope you enjoyed the show. It would really help us out if you could please leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Be sure to check out our website, www.extremesportsperformance.com, that has details about our consultancy services, our in-person and online store, our in-person and online education, our media pages, our contact details, and how to subscribe for free to stay informed about company news and updates. Join our social media community on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Links to these can be found at the bottom of all pages on our website and via any search engine. Until next time, take care.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.